Hey friends, welcome to episode 481 of the My 123 Cents podcast. We are getting ever closer to episode 500 coming up in June of 2024 and still working on some ideas for guests and or a guest or a concept. Also working on some other things to add a little extra to the My 123 Cents YouTube channel. Now, if you're just listening to the podcast, I encourage you to go check out the YouTube channel, youtube.com/my 123 cents. There are other segments on there, other little give me a minute. There's some figure unboxings with Go Figure, other episodes of Wrestling Under the Influence, much smaller bits of information can be found on the YouTube channel, 3 to 5 minutes usually on most of the vlogs, unless it's a give me a minute and then it's 60 seconds or less. So looking to add more content though, do some fun things, some games and other things, working with Chad on some ideas and working on some new ideas for content for the next few weeks, few months, right here as well. And still haven't completely made up my mind if episode 500 is going to kind of be the ending of the My 123 Cents podcast and then the launch of something new, or if I'm going to just kind of revamp and redo what's happening with My 123 Cents, making some minor changes along the way between here and there. But this week we are going back to the Wrestling Under the Influence formula, and we'll get to the beer and the topic in just a minute or two as I pause to take a quick drink of water. But I also wanted to talk about, my original intent with My 123 Cents, way back when it started off as a blog, was just writing opinion pieces and memories and thinking of the quote unquote good old days of wrestling. And the podcast has stayed pretty close to that. I have talked about current events. Last week I did the Royal Rumble wrap, and then Chad joined me for just a YouTube exclusive with his kind of point of view on the Royal Rumble. And we talked about a few other things because by then we knew that CM Punk had been injured and whatnot. Now there's a new layer to the onion. It seems like every week we record a podcast and then all this other stuff comes out. So that's kind of what YouTube will be, kind of bridging some of those moments that happen between the podcasts from week to week. Now, I'm not going to say never ever, but I want to keep this kind of still that nostalgic ride, and not necessarily so much on modern day or current stuff. And I say that, and I'm going to actually be doing a more modern topic with this week's podcast, but I'm thinking of keeping it still more on that lighthearted. And I'm not going to talk about the news that's going on right now with The Rock and Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins and what's going on with WrestleMania, because I'm going to trust the process and I'm going to wait and see how things go and see where we end up when we get to Philadelphia. But I will say for right now, if the things that are being presented end up coming to fruition, I'll be disappointed. I do think that Cody, I guess the story is that Cody finishing the story is winning the championship, not necessarily beating Roman Reigns for the championship. So I get that. And so we'll wait and see. We'll wait and see where things end up going at WrestleMania. We've still got Elimination Chamber coming up. So I'm going to pump the brakes before I get all preachy and start complaining and canceling Peacock or, never watching WWE again. I'm not, to me, it's not one or two people or one or two storylines or programs that makes me interested. And what I have kind of discovered with this whole Vince McMahon fiasco, not even he is bigger than WWE. It's not taking away my enjoyment of him no longer being a part of the company, and I do have a video up on YouTube right now, as well as on the My 123 Cents Instagram page, which has really taken off, about a few thoughts on canceling Vince McMahon or erasing him from the company's history. So be sure to check those out, weigh in, let me know, subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe to this podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also check us out on jitterymonkey.com, all the other programs going on there as well. So this week, as I mentioned, is going to be another Wrestling Under the Influence. And Wrestling Under the Influence is something that I have come to love. The beer this week is called Big Hugs. It is by Half Acre Brewing. out of Chicago, Half Acre Beer out of Chicago. This is a coffee stout, and it is 10% alcohol by volume, so it packs quite a punch. And of course, with big hugs, we're going to talk about Bayley and kind of talk about early Bayley, NXT Bayley, and the early times of her on the WWE roster. But let's first do our pour here. Of course, it's a coffee stout, so it's going to be dark. And again, 10% alcohol by volume. It's packs quite a punch, and I got a lot of foam going on here, but that's okay. I've been told that that's okay to do the pour like that. Nice, nice coffee aroma, and again, the color looks great. Now I'm gonna get through all this foam, so stand by. It's really good. Again, it's a coffee stout. It's a stout. Typically, with a stout, you're going to have a heavier experience with this. So, lately, I've been drinking, even though it's winter still, I have been drinking some more spring or summer inspired beers. So, this one is a little heavy, but again, it tastes great. And you're not going to drink a lot of these because it's the 10% alcohol by volume. So, definitely going to give this one a hug like Bayley would back in the day. And we may see her doing more hugging now that she is seemingly turning babyface, but would definitely give this one a 3 count on the scale for the my 1, 2, 3 cents wrestling under the influence. A 3 count is good. It's a winner, so we'll raise this glass in victory and talk more about Bayley. So, Bayley came to WWE through NXT, was part of developmental, and came through the ranks there, starting in NXT back in 2012. So about 12 years ago, started and wrestled independently before that. So she's been around on the independent scene, and then coming to NXT. She kind of reminded me the happy-go-lucky, side ponytail. It reminded me of an indie-rific gimmick, and I don't mean that to come off sounding insulting, but it reminded me of something that you would not see on the everyday WWE roster. But it worked. I thought that it was fun. It was a fun gimmick. I didn't necessarily love it. I would say of the four horsewomen, which back at that time consisted of Charlotte Flair, Becky Lynch, Sasha Banks, and Bayley. Bayley was either 3 or 4 for me in that ranking, And again, and I'm not trying to be negative by any means, but I'm not a huge Sasha Banks fan either. But I think that Bayley played that gimmick very well. It was a positive role model for young girls. This was in a time when still that women's revolution is still kind of coming to fruition. It's taking shape. Charlotte and Becky and Sasha kind of led the way on the main roster, and Bayley, for whatever reason, was held back and stayed back on the NXT roster. And I think they didn't want to necessarily lose all of their top tier female talent, in one full swoop. And so Bayley stayed, and I think kind of helped establish and build that roster in developmental in NXT when NXT. And I think NXT is still considered a developmental training ground and giving men and women an opportunity and giving them a chance to grow and develop and become better professional wrestlers and become WWE superstars. Because it's so much more than just the in-ring action, as we've seen through the years. It requires the microphone abilities, kind of sometimes those acting chops when you're doing vignettes or promos or getting that emotion of the crowd, storytelling. WWE, without a doubt, is the best when it comes to telling those stories and getting fans invested and hooked and becoming a part of the process and becoming a part of what they're doing. And I think that, Bayley was great at that. She continues to be great at that. Talk about some of her accomplishments through the years. As I mentioned, she was in NXT. She was the NXT Women's Champion. She also was, once she got called up to the main roster, and again, she's still going on with the hugs. Bayley likes to hug. She's running around and giving fans the hugs obviously at ringside. She's hugging. Her finishing maneuver was the Bayley to Bayley, or Bayley to belly, belly to Bayley. I'm screwing that up, but it was basically a belly to belly suplex, but where she's hugging her opponent and then turning it into, that uh, suplex, if you will, and having success with it. I loved the big inflatable. You see them at car lots and stuff and parking lots trying to attract attention. I don't know what the official name of them is, but those big inflatable things that wave around. But when they turned her heel and she cut those with a knife and deflated them, I feel like her heel turn was probably one of the most overdue for starters, but also one of the best executed in modern history, just because she had gone from such a almost too pure and too like baby face, white meat baby face in your face, kind of annoying to a point. Kind of those Rocky Maivia early days, and even a little bit of John Cena, but Cena, stayed the course and never turned. But I think with Bayley, it was the right decision to make. It was a right call, and she's done it wonderfully through the last couple of years, last probably 4 or 5 years. I believe she turned heel in 1990, or I'm sorry, 1990, in 2019. But she actually moved up to the main roster in 2016. So she spent about 3 years with that kind of sugary sweet bubblegum esque persona, if you will. But turning her heel turned to be a good move for her. Sometimes I think that there's a concern that if they turn heel, how will it affect merch? And maybe it did affect merch, because they were selling bracelets and the hair. I think maybe the hair scrunchies. Um, and then she turned into almost like this Karen-like character with the haircut. Wore her hair different. She had a different way she dressed, the presentation. She did such a great job with all of that it just really resonated and worked so very well. And so, she wins the Money in the Bank ladder match. She's actually made quite a few accomplishments, distinguish her as kind of a trendsetter. Like I said before, you had, she's in a class with Charlotte Flair and Becky Lynch and with Sasha Banks, and those three always seem to excel and rise and kind of shine in the spotlight. And Bayley always kind of felt like didn't. And she really deserves to be. She really deserves some flowers and for the accomplishments and the things that she has achieved in her career and in just a few short years, since 2019, when she came up to the main roster. And so seeing her in that light, I think has kind of changed some perceptions and opinions, at least coming from me, for sure. She is the longest reigning SmackDown Women's Champion. She held that belt for 380 days, which that was a feat that I did not realize that she had done. She's also the very first female Triple Crown and Grand Slam champion. So she has held the NXT Women's Championship, the Raw Women's Championship, the SmackDown Women's Championship, and of course the WWE Women's Tag Team Championship that she held with Sasha Banks. So that was a pretty big accomplishment. She's the first. She's not the only, but she was the first to do that, finishing that feat in 2019. So she accomplished all that pretty quickly in her run in WWE. And 3 short years, she became the first Triple Crown and Grand Slam champion. She's also the first woman to defend a championship in WWE in Saudi Arabia. And that happened in February of 2020. It was the Super Showdown in Saudi Arabia, and this was just weeks before COVID, before the world changed. So it was February 27th, 2020, that she made that milestone, defending the belt and beating Naomi in a match where she held on to her belt. And now, most recently, she is the longest running or longest tenured woman in the women's Royal Rumble match. 1 hour, 3 minutes, and I believe 3 seconds. So that has set a new record. She is the Iron Woman holder for the Royal Rumble out of, I believe, 7 women's Royal Rumble matches. And I can't remember if Michael Cole said she's been in all 7 of them or not, but she's been in a lot of them. She was in the first one, I know for sure. And she said, she said some good things in the press conference. Chad and I talked about this briefly and I think I may have mentioned it also on last week's episode, talking about the Royal Rumble. But you know, it was her contention that the women's roster right now is so rich and so deep. Most importantly, that they didn't need to bring in a lot of legends. They didn't bring in any legends. They did bring in some other talent from other promotions, um, like Jordan Grace, for example. But it's refreshing. The women's roster has evolved so much that you can do a 30-woman Royal Rumble and not have to rely on legends, not have to bring in Santina Marella or bring in Trish Stratus or Lita. Nothing wrong with those talents, but it's refreshing and awesome to see that the current crop of women that are are getting that opportunity to shine and be a part of kind of history in the making, and as things continue to evolve and grow and develop with WWE. Now we have seen Bayley, like I said, the last almost 5 years now, 4.5 years at least, wrestling as a heel. And I know she had some time off there with an injury. But I think that talent needs, especially in WWE, when there's a lot of we see a lot of the same talent week in and week out. I think it's important to change those characters up from time to time. The evolution, wrestlers are able to stay in the ring and have longer in-ring careers. And to me, that requires, updating the gimmick, if you will, updating the character, making them more viable to continue on, to carry on. We saw it with The Undertaker. We saw it with Goldust. We saw it with Triple H. We saw it with Shawn Michaels. We saw it with Kane. These were staples in the company who had been around for long, long periods of time and then would either turn heel, would turn face, but would change their character in some way. Undertaker from the dead man to the American badass, back to the dead man and kind of tweaking and being in between American badass and the dead man. And so I think with Bayley, being that bubblegum Bayley, for lack of a better word, to kind of the Karen Bayley, to where she's going now, and obviously Friday night on SmackDown, her teammates in Damage Control essentially kicking her out of the group. And it's been planted. Those seeds were planted, and we were watching it go and waiting to see it kind of finally happen and how they're going to execute it and pull it off. Because I think there was thought, she's going to go after Rhea Ripley and go for the women's championship from her, but instead, kind of making it known that she wants Iyo Sky and wants her championship. So I think that it's going to be a great match. I don't think. There's talk of, there's been talk before, the women only, I believe it was the year in 2019 when it was Ronda Rousey. Maybe did Sasha Banks, I could be wrong here, Sasha Banks and Bianca Belair, I don't know if they closed out the first night of WrestleMania in 2021. I don't remember for sure. So I could be wrong about that, but there's only been I know there's been at least one time where the women main event at WrestleMania. I don't know if it's been twice. It could have been twice. I don't think Bayley and Iyo will close out and be the main event, but I could be wrong. There's still time to continue to grow and develop that story. We're still several weeks away from WrestleMania, so certainly there's the time to make that happen. I'll be curious to see how her character evolution goes, though, Bayley's, that is. Will she return to the bubblegum look? Will she keep kind of the Karen look going? The fans, I think, were ready and want to embrace her once again, especially after that Royal Rumble performance. When you get in there and you go an hour and 3 minutes, you set a new record. You establish yourself as a contender and someone that should be taken seriously. And I think that, for the years that I did kind of, I don't want to say took her for granted or didn't give her much attention, because I did prefer Charlotte Flair and Becky Lynch over Bayley. But, I think that she has proven herself. She has come a long way through the years and has developed into a character who has made an impact and has definitely made some significant strides and continues to help And she's still young enough at 34 to continue to have a great in-ring career and also be a guiding light for those younger talents who are coming up through NXT, who are young on the roster in WWE, and really grow and develop and nurture that as well. And I think that that's always a great thing when wrestlers, when superstars are able to share their trades, share their secrets, share their knowledge, and help others grow and develop. Now, will Sasha Banks show back up? We saw Naomi come back. Will Sasha Banks come back and be a part of this? With Jade Cargill, is she going to go to NXT? Is she coming to the main roster? I tend to think she's going to go to NXT for a little bit to marinate and develop and grow as a superstar. And I don't think that's a bad thing either. I think that NXT, as we have seen with Braun Breaker, he had a breakout performance at the Royal Rumble, and due to circumstances going on with Brock Lesnar and whatnot, could be taking Brock's place. I heard that he took Brock's place in the Rumble. Could he be the one that goes after and challenges Gunther and ends Gunther's 500 plus day reign as the Intercontinental Champion? And then Gunther moves on to bigger and better things. It's like that passing of the torch. It's like keeping the thing going, the momentum going. And that's where I come back to, there is no one superstar that makes or breaks WWE. Rock coming in and going, it's great. It'll be a nice little boom for business. I've seen people on both sides of the fence. Some love it, some hate it. But The Rock's not bigger than the company. Vince McMahon, as we have learned, is not bigger than the company. Brock Lesnar is not bigger than the company. The company will survive and thrive when these big departures happen, whether they are by, aging out, retirement, investigations that are going on, injuries, unfortunately, death. Business, the WWE business model will continue to survive and grow and develop and evolve because they continue to grow and develop and evolve these talents. The young talents coming in through NXT, the people like Bayley and Sasha Banks and Becky Lynch and Bianca Belair, and they just grow and they develop and they get better. And then they share their recipes for success, and it grows and it develops and it continues to move on and grow and develop. And that's where you get this amazing pool of talent. People could argue that right now, maybe the best time for WWE in terms of financial power, in terms of talent on the roster, but there are a couple of black eyes. And so how we proceed forward, what happens next, we have to wait and see. But for now, I think that Bayley is going to be that kind of underdog. She's going to return back to that fighting spirit that got her the win in the Royal Rumble, that set that record in the Royal Rumble, that brought her all these other accolades throughout. I wonder about Sasha Banks coming back in. Does she come in and help balance with Damage Control? Do Naomi and Sasha kind of have Bayley's back, and a new faction is born to combat Asuka and Iyo Sky and the other members of Damage Control? Does Damage Control become a new faction in and of its own? I don't know. That's the beauty of pro wrestling. That's the beauty of storytelling and not knowing and not being able to predict and not being cynical when things don't go the way that we hope that they go. Bayley may go to WrestleMania and fail and flounder and bounce back down the card. I hope that doesn't happen. I think that she certainly has proven that she is a talent to be contended with and to, again, hold that belt, and maybe she moves into something down the road with Jade Cargill. We'll have to wait and see. Who knows? We don't know what the future holds, but we have to wait and see, and then not get pissy when things don't go the way that we absolutely thought or wanted or hoped that they would go. That's just kind of the life of a wrestling fan in general, I think. So again, we'll raise a glass to Bayley. We'll raise a glass to our brewery here, Half Acre Beer in Chicago, Illinois. Giving this a 3 count and wishing Bayley all the best. I do hope that Bayley wins the championship at WrestleMania against Iyo Sky. And then we further that story and tell more with the development and the growth of the women's division, which is continuing to be one of the best parts of WWE. The Women's Royal Rumble, by the way, in part to Bayley's performance, but some of the other performances that we saw in there was my favorite part of the 2024 Royal Rumble. So as always, I look forward to hearing your comments, your questions. What did you think of Bayley's performance at the Royal Rumble? What do you think of Bayley in general? And what do you think of the state of wrestling? Where are we headed? What do you think will happen at Elimination Chamber? And then heading into WrestleMania. We'll talk more about that as we get closer. And again, some more ideas coming up. If you have ideas for topics that you want to hear discussed here on the podcast or over on the YouTube channel as independent videos, let me know. Have a great week. We will talk again soon.